Live on thehannibaltv.com with another edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling, and tonight I'm pleased to have a man who I've been looking forward to having an interview with because of the really unique nature of his promotion, the whole story behind Totally Arctic Wrestling, and that would be the founder, the proprietor, representing with the shirt there, Des Loreen. Des, how are you tonight, sir?
Oh, thank you so much, Jack. I'm doing great. Honestly, it's a fluke because like 90% of the shirts I wear are TAW because I just take them. So just kidding. But no, man, I'm doing really good. It's a beautiful day here. The snow is already sticking here in Inuvik, and it's winter. It's winter time.
Yes, sir. And we're actually starting to feel it down south here, close to Ottawa. It's definitely taken a chilly turn. But I wanted to first of all mention that for the fans that haven't been aware of your promotion before, that you are Canada's only own Inuk or Inuit based wrestling promotion. And you corrected me before we went on air, but the most northern promotion in pro wrestling terms for the entire world. So can you let us know about how that you came to the idea to start your wrestling promotion?
Yeah, for sure. So it was actually June 2019. A friend of mine, Wade Blue, Grubin, and I, both got together. And hey, what's up, Alfred? And we got together and we said, you know what? We want to bring wrestling to the North. He wanted to learn how to be a wrestler, and I'm just big into promotion and production of it and all. And learning how to wrestle would be super cool too. Like I'm 40 now, so do the math. I was like mid 30s, late 30s at the time. Definitely not an athlete at all. So, like I think in high school, we always wanted to wrestle, watching the pay-per-views, bunch of us, 6 of us. And then afterwards we'd throw each other around in the snow. But it never really happened, there was you hear the story of Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn right after high school. They just went and followed their dream and made it happen. We definitely had the talks to do it, but living up in Inuvik, close to the Arctic coast, it costs like $2,000 Canadian to get to Edmonton from where I am. And then what are you going to do? Right. You got to save money. So for us, it was always about bringing top notch entertainment to the North. Right. In 2004, a bunch of business owners here in town brought pro wrestling to town. We had Brutus Beefcake was brought up, King Kong Bundy, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. It was crazy. It was a lot of people that really people knew from TV, right? And a whole bunch of indie wrestlers from Alberta. But the cost of that was $25,000. Excuse me. So it wasn't really feasible to do it again ever. So they ran 2 shows, Friday, Saturday night, and then they left town. And that was just becoming a memory now for people my generation. So I think when me and Blue got together, we said, you know what we should do is bring wrestling back, but we could bring the ring here. We'll own our own ring and train, put on seminars, and then see who we could bring. The whole thing I wanted to do is I wanted to be in the front row to watch world-class pro wrestling in the Arctic Circle of Canada. That was my goal. Blue wanted to wrestle. That's good, and he's wrestled for us. He's yet to travel out. Noel Cockney, Nolan Bear, he's wrestled in the BC already. He's wrestled Alberta. So he's making the circuits happen. I'm lucky enough to wrestle in Florida now. So we're getting out there slowly. Definitely, though, the geographical remoteness is a real barrier for us, right? Because even if we wanted to drive out, we're driving 14 hours to Whitehorse, Yukon. And then we're making our own scene there, So it's pretty wild to think, though, now that it's 2023 now. We're entering our fourth. This is going to be our fourth anniversary show, whatever, the fourth big one we've done now in November. And it's awesome, man. We thought when we started this in June of 2019 that we were going to be wrestling in front of 20 people and they were going to be laughing at us and calling us marks because we didn't know what we were doing. Instead, we packed the house to 130 people to capacity, and we had to turn away 30 people at the door. So I think the start of it so far has been really electric, and I think a big part of it is because of the crowds we don't have anything like it. I mean, I'm not the best promoter in the world. I'm definitely not even a great wrestler by any means. So I don't think, if we started this down south, it wouldn't be anything. It would be another promotion, right? So I'm very lucky, and I realize that. I'm grateful for our geographical remoteness and the uniqueness that comes with it.
Yeah, that was a question that I wanted to get into right off the hop for the fans that haven't been up north, and I've had the pleasure and the fortunate ability to have been in Nunavut and Northwest Territories anyway. So could you describe for the fans just what a typical community looks like that you run in there? I know you run in one in particular, but what does that look like in 2023 in terms of some of the facets of living in the South that we take for granted?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're driving we're in a community right now where, because of the permafrost, our piping, the sewage is all above ground in tubes, right, in pipes. And then when we go farther north to the Arctic coast, to the community of Tuktoyaktuk, it's all water trucks. There's no running water from house to house, right? The remoteness of it, so then it's a 2-hour drive up there on right to the Arctic coast. We're not seeing grocery stores. There's a department store, but there's not a whole lot of range. There's one restaurant that's open, sort of a mom and pops kind of thing. There's no hospital. It's like a nursing station. So you have to fly here to Inuvik, and we're only 3,000 people here, right? So we're playing communities of 900, so it gets smaller and smaller, but the passion for it is so there,
Mm-hmm. In terms of growing up, I take it that you were a fan of the business growing up. And that being said, did you have any particular companies or promotions that inspired you to where you are today to promote and start your own thing?
I mean, definitely. I think just growing up watching WWF, of course, watching the Fed, I think was a big thing. And sort of that's where we fell in love with it. That's when we sort of realized this was something that was happening. And then you sort of get older and older. You're sort of keeping an eye on things. I remember there was, I think Kurt Sorokin was running stuff down there in Alberta. There was indie wrestling when I remember going to Edmonton to watch a house show for WWF. You'd see posters, and I was like, oh, there's a scene here. That's cool. I didn't know. So I'm not from there. And then you find out there's a scene everywhere, pretty much. The wrestling is all across Canada. So for us, though, I think the big indie wrestling league that I first got involved with was Big West Pro Wrestling. Big West Wrestling out of Kelowna, BC, with Mad Dog Marty Sugar. He's the one that came up to Inuvik, gave us a seminar, and really lived here for a year and a half and showed us the ropes, literally, right? So I think Big West was really instrumental in getting us started, for sure.
Did you ever happen to catch, or were you aware of the historical record has it that Stampede ran some shows in the Yellowknife area? Were you aware of that growing up? Or
see, no, not at all. I was born 83. I got into wrestling mid 90s. I think it was WrestleMania. The build up to WrestleMania 9 was just happening live. My buddy had all the Coliseum video wrestling tapes there. So I didn't get exposed to a lot of that, right? Stampede wrestling, I never really got any of that. So now sort of going backwards now is almost like a historian and getting that history now finally, it's pretty awesome. But yeah, Yellowknife definitely is cool, which is north of 60, but it's not in the Arctic Circle, right? So people, I've heard people, we went, because you can drive to Yellowknife, you can drive to Fort Smith and Hay River from Edmonton, and that's been done before. But you can't drive to where we are unless you go up the Liard Highway, up through Whitehorse, the Yukon, and then the Dempster to us. So it's a bit of a trek.
Yeah. In terms of the ultimate decision that you had, what were the major factors that because being a promoter myself, running independent wrestling in Ontario, in Quebec is a daunting enough task, but I can't imagine what came together aside from, we're all fans at our heart, and that is a huge portion of it. But what factors solidified for you to decide to give this a shot?
Well, I mean, I think, I've got a history in journalism. I've got a history in acting, short filmmaking, sketch comedy, stand-up comedy. So all of that kind of lent itself to wanting to put on a production. I was, drama kid in high school here. There wasn't a big program, but I was sort of already thirsty to do that. And then when it came to production, I was already very comfortable with editing. Like I do all the editing and most of the camera work whenever I can. I'll get out of the ring and like just clean up and then take the camera over, because like I'm editing the footage and I know what I kind of want to see. So it's easier for that. But yeah, and definitely getting it together. Like you said, promoting a wrestling show in the city or in a pretty close area to a city, it can be enough. There's enough moving parts logistically. But when you're paying now for flights, we've actually had to alter our last card. We were going to bring in 2 wrestlers, but because of the wildfires that were happening here in the NWT, they canceled a lot of flights on us. And so one weekend that we were running, we actually couldn't bring in one of the talent we wanted to. So it's a really big barrier, because, flights are very expensive to come up north, but we're getting more of a local buy-in now. We have businesses that are coming in. We're looking at grants and what we can do because we are an indigenous group. Like I'm a Nuvialuit myself. I might not look it because my dad was Métis. So I've got like a beard. A lot of my cousins don't. They're really jealous of the beard. But no, so we're looking at getting grants. We're looking at getting local indigenous government buy-ins. Like I was on the Tony Condello death tour this past fall, spring in February. And as a promoter, I got to kind of see a bit about, how he does that. And a lot of it is calling the chief and council and telling them, hey, you pay me for the show and it's free to your community. We'll go in there and run the biggest entertainment that you guys have ever seen all year round. You pay us this amount. I don't know what the amount is, but it's negotiable. Make it worth the while, right? Because that death tour, man, my God, that was wow, that was something else, man. I tell you, that was something else. I've been wrestling now for a couple of years, and like maybe 25 matches now, 26 matches over the 4 years, right? Not a lot by any means. So now to be on the death tour, I think I got 8 of those matches on that tour, and it was nuts. Like it was something else, man. It was wild.
What this is kind of a segue, but what were your impressions of the legendary Tony Condello and that whole death tour? Is I understand the last time I interviewed him that CBC are going to be doing a bit of a series on the death tour, but what were your impressions as to the just the absolute acumen for the business that Tony had to make that work, just as you said, logistically?
And that's it. I've actually been looking at the poster here because we actually got a sneak preview of the documentary that was made on the last tour there, the 11th tour. 30th, the 50 years of promoting. It was Massive's 11th tour. Sorry. It was awesome talking to Tony. That guy he's got so much going on at one given time. I've heard, I think I've heard from a lot of people that he was going to be a character. I think Jericho said he was going to be a real character, and just looking at YouTube videos of the tour that were from 10, 15 years ago, it's changed a lot, right? I mean, it's still very uncomfortable. Believe me, I was just coming off the 4th Jericho cruise. I didn't even get to come home. I went from Miami to Toronto to Winnipeg, and the next morning we were off onto Northern Ontario. And Air Canada they didn't lose my suitcase. They sent it to Edmonton instead of getting off in Winnipeg. So I didn't have any of my gear or my clothes. I didn't have any sleeping bags. I didn't have anything with me. I had to buy it all on the road. Now, coming from Northern Canada already, I'm used to that prices, the steep prices in the reses on the reservations there. So it's pretty cool, but definitely just seeing it firsthand. The biggest thing for me, though, was seeing, you hear about the suicide epidemics that's going on in the remote communities of Canada, in Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, but there were 8 deaths on that 3-week tour we were on. 8. That was the most Tony said he's seen in all of his years of doing this. And these are youth, right? Like these are kids. Like they said they found a 14-year-old girl in between the two communities we went through. So we ended up staying in one of the schools for like 3 nights because we couldn't go to the next community because they were grieving. So we had to make a new plan. And that's the kind of stuff Tony's dealing with on the fly. Is we're in the middle of it right now. We can't just cancel. We have to go somewhere else. So now we're driving instead of a 5-hour drive or a 4-hour drive. It's a 10 to 12-hour drive on a good day. And the ring he's got, God bless the guy, that old son of a gun, you know, there you have it. But I mean, it's an old ass ring. It's big and heavy. And it took like 8 or 9 of us to put it up legitimately at one time. But then you hear that this is the ring that Andre wrestled in. And it's like, okay, well, then I'm going to lug this around. And Tony said it used to be longer. It used to be a 20-foot ring, but he couldn't get the planks to fit in like in a van that would make the trip. So he had welders cut it down. And now I think it's like just over 16, just over 18 maybe.
Wow, what a truly Canadian story. We'll look forward to that documentary for sure. Can you explain to the fans that may not be aware the significance of the narwhal tusk in your logo there and how you landed on that?
So that's funny. That's actually really funny. That was designed by a friend. I actually made that, like the original logo for TAW. The T and the W were connected, right? So the T would come across and become part of the W, and the A was just like the tent, almost like an anarchy A, right? So it was actually a friend of mine that had that design there, and he thought it like you said, the tusk, it looked sort of northern. It gave it more of a thing there. So we've got sort of takes on it. We've got a beaded championship belt. I think we're the only promotion that I've ever seen with a leather and beaded like indigenous championship belt. But yeah, it speaks to the Arctic of it. You know, it speaks to the northern, the uniqueness of it, because like I said, we have a card we're playing where, you know, we're an indigenous owned company. So we're playing that kind of tongue in cheek, you know, like we did a hardcore match with the boys where one of them went through a table, but the table was from a bingo hall and we taped bingo cards to it. And so the guy's like, hang on, you know, like we've taken bingo dabbers out. You know, we've hit each other with, like, we've gone through smokehouses and stuff. And so we're trying to incorporate more of it. Nolar Bear wears mucklucks to the ring. So he's got traditional mucklucks. He's the one that actually made the championship. So he's the one that sewed it together and did the beading himself. So it's all it's nice to have that sort of representation, you know, from Noel, because he's very indigenous, very traditional, whereas I'm a non-traditional Inuvialuit, right?
Super cool. It's one of the when fans tune into your channel, they note your venue, Agamo Hall. How did you land on that as a place to have many of your shows? And is it difficult? I'm not sure what the capacity is, but it's a very traditional looking building. And I wanted to ask, you know, having challenges with venues myself, if it's difficult to stage, or how did you select that building as kind of your home base?
Cool. Well, I mean, so Ingamo Hall is the oldest, most traditional. It's the most historical building in town. It was made in the 60s by a British Columbia cabin maker. So he was like making wood cabins all over Canada. All the wood came up the Mackenzie River, all the logs, and it was he had a local crew help him. So I've grown up there. I went to daycare there. Like I said, I'm 40 years old. My earliest memories were at like daycare in that building. And so for me, we were playing there since we were kids. You know, they would have bingos, community dances, drum dances, northern games, Arctic sports would happen there. So when we looked for our first venue, the one thing I did not want us to do was blend in with everybody else that's already out there, right? We're already amateur enough. We're already green enough. We don't want to get lost into the whole shuffle of another community hall room, another bigger room than we need with 10 people around the ring. So first of all, room size was big important to me. Ingamo was my first choice because of the aesthetic. It's a log cabin. It's also a friendship center. So that was kind of ironic. But the log cabin setting really spoke to totally Arctic for us, right? So I said, you know what, let's try it. And for sure, the executive director at the time said, absolutely. Like, they didn't know what they were getting into. They thought they were going to have 30 people show up and it was going to be a flop, right? Like, this has never been done before. We'd been, rolling around training for a couple of months. It was very, very new. November 16th, 2019 was our first show. And man, I tell you, we went in there, we packed the house. It's a 250 person room, but when you put the ring in the middle of it, it takes up a lot of space. Sorry, I didn't read that. I didn't get to read that. I was too busy hearing my own voice here.
Just the fan, Alfred,
oh, yeah.
Friend of the show, putting you
cool.
over, man.
Oh, that's great. No, and it is. Thank you so much, because that's what it's for. Honestly, I could talk for days about it. The night after our first event, I got a phone call from a friend, and she sent me a picture of her son's birthday party, and he was turning 10, and there was a dozen boys all shirtless in the living room throwing each other around. And she says, "Look what you did. Look what you've done." And I said, "Great," And there's kids now that come up to us in the store. I feel so bad for the one girl's mom. This girl must be like 7, under that. And every time she sees me, she could be across the road or down the street, wherever. "Hey, you're from wrestling. And her poor mom is always like, "Oh my God, this kid," right? Like, this poor kid. But it's great, because even the adults now, they're all into it. Everybody, the one person came up to me and they were like, I remember when we first started, you get a lot of guff everywhere you go, right? People want to give you shit and give you a hard time wherever. He was like, "Oh, you think you're tough, huh? You're a wrestler. You think you're tough?" I said, "No, dude, if I thought I was tough, I'd be a fighter, bro. I'm a performer, man. I'm an entertainer. That's why I'm here. That's why we're here." And it's been great. So actually, when we started, we knew that I think people expected us to just do it on gym mats. You know what I mean? Just on the floor, like no ring, just, Arctic, whatever, backyard, whatever we could do. So my brother-in-law actually had a boxing ring that he had set up in his garage. And I said, "Dude, like, that's a 5-rope boxing ring, and it's a short apron, maybe a 1.5 feet off or whatever it was." But I said, "That's a platform. That's a stage is what it is." Mm-hmm. And so we bought it off of him for $5,000. I got a buddy of mine in town who said he was there for the first meeting of me and my buddy that wanted to start this. And he said, "You know what? I believe in you guys, and I've got money I don't tell you boys about, because if I told you, you'd borrow it from me and I'd never get it back." So he says, "I'll give you $5,000. Buy it off your brother." So we bought the ring. The trucking company up here brought it up for free. 2,500 pounds of steel. They shipped it in Inuvik for free, pretty much across country. We get it up here. We set it up. And then you realize that a boxing ring is very different from a pro wrestling ring. Mm-hmm. It's a stage. There's no give, right? Mm-hmm. So for the first 2.5 years, 3 years, we wrestled in a boxing ring. So we brought Cheeseburger in. We brought people. We brought wrestlers from all over Alberta. I became friends with Cheeseburger thanks to some really awesome people, and I invited Cheese to come up, and sure enough, he came up. He was the 3rd ever TAW champion. He was when he found out that there was nobody else in the circumpolar world that was pro wrestling, he proclaimed himself the circumpolar champion of the world. But unfortunately, he was a transition champ. He lost it the next night in the Arctic coast to Nolar Bear, which was an awesome match. But yeah, so we've had names, but when we brought Cheese up here, we had a boxing ring. So he showed us some really cool ring work, but he was very much like, you're not throwing me in this thing. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I've got to, and we're not asking him to, you know what I mean? Not asking him to. So we ended up getting a pro wrestling ring last year, and it's been incredible. As somebody who learned how to pro wrestle in a boxing ring and bumped in that like quite a bit. Yeah. It's now that we have an actual pro wrestling ring, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's funny. There, years ago, about 10 years ago now, Great North Wrestling did a tour of Thunder Bay, and long story short, the ring didn't arrive, but Devin Hannibal found a boxing ring, and the whole show happened on that, and very few would bump on that, with the exception of Jeremy Prophet. So yeah, definitely not optimal. Well, good you have a pro ring.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask you about, do you see a link between running shows in these communities and healing, truth, and reconciliation in the communities?
Well, absolutely, man. I think that's a big thing for us. I think there's a lot of generational trauma that's happened here in the Arctic, in every rural community, especially the indigenous ones across Canada. And in the Arctic, you see it a lot because I've been to Manitoba now. I can say with experience, I've been to northern Manitoba communities, and they are remote, but you are only 6 to 8 hours away from Winnipeg. You're an hour, you can drive it, right? Where here there's a lot of fly-in communities, and there's fly-in communities there too. I'm not trying to say there aren't, but when you have fly-in communities, which is what we're surrounded by, you really do, you see that. So I think it speaks to bringing entertainment to the communities there. Have a laugh. A good friend of mine, Paul Rablaskis, has a show called Acting Good, and Sonia Ballantyne, another friend of mine, she actually wrote the episode. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the episode is about them bringing a wrestling show into the res, and they actually have a character, and the characters, what they do is they take a random white wrestler from the South, and they put a mask and a business suit on him and a little briefcase, and they call him Mr. Indian Affairs. And his whole job is to take the job to the indigenous wrestler, right? There's a big wrestler, and he travels to all the communities, and he beats up Mr. Indian, except for in the episode, the guy doesn't make his flight. So they don't have Mr. Indian Affairs. So they take the northern manager and put him in the costume, and he wrestles the match. And it's really awesome. Like it's things like this that touch on, reasons of about colonization, about settlers. But there's a really deep humor in the indigenous communities as well. Like I said, I'm Métis, I'm a Nunavut. I identify as a Nunavut. They say you're not just half a Nunavut. You either are or you aren't. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I'm definitely, I take pride in that. We're from the Western Arctic here. Excuse me. And I think that there's a place for it. I think there's definitely a tale to be told for resiliency. I think the kids love the representation. Like I was just on that tour of Manitoba with the matriarch, with Sage out of Alberta, and she was wrestling in front of these indigenous communities, and she is a come to life, like a comic book, like a superhero to these kids, because she is exactly them. She's winning these matches for them, and to see these kids out there, and it's the connection to the communities has been really good. But then not just that, the adults, they're seeing the entertainment, and they don't get that stuff. So I think that everybody gets something out of it. I think, definitely indigenous communities have been wrestling fans for a long time, whether it be the drama, I think was a big one. I remember going to WrestleMania 2018 in New Orleans, and I brought a sign, and it was to the Raw after WrestleMania, and we had really good seats, and I knew that we were going to get seen, so I made an igloo sign. It was this igloo shape, and it just had "Proud Inuk" on it, and I held it up so high. It was on TV all night, and I shared it to a Nunavut hunting page, and it has 10,000 followers on Facebook, and it got shared so many times that on my flight home, I actually got recognized on the plane by somebody from one of the communities. And she was like, "Can I get your picture?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool." Like, it's universal, man. You don't realize how small and tight-knit pro wrestling community is in Canada until you're in it. Because I've got people from I've got Mark from C4. He reached out right away and said, "Hey, it's great what you guys are doing up there. Like, if there's anything we can do to help you, let us know." Because there's so many people wanting to make pro wrestling as good as it can be.
What do you get any feedback for those fans watching that may not be aware? The role of elders in communities, especially northern communities. Have you had any feedback from the traditional people?
Oh yeah,
in the communities when you're bringing the show in.
Everybody comes out. Everybody comes out. They all love what we're doing for the kids. They think it's hilarious. One of the elders that I know that I've worked with as a filmmaker, as a manager, through communications. He's done a lot of government videos with me and translations and things. He loves the fact that I call myself the Eskimofo. So he's always calling me Mr. Eskimofo. Hey, Mr. Eskimofo. And it's hilarious because he actually knew my great grandfather. Right. Wow. So we're talking about somebody that's 2 generations now away. And I'm sitting there telling this old man, I'm like, "Yo, bro, come on. You're still there. You can still get in the ring with me. Come on. We'll teach you. You can bump me." I'm telling him, "You just drop that forearm on me and I'll take it like a champ." Right. I will make you look like $1 million. And then he looks over at his buddy. They're the same age. And he says, "Doesn't this guy remind you of Ratty, his great grandfather? Doesn't he remind you of him? Look at him, the way he acts." And then the guy goes, Yeah. How? right? Like that's not, to me, that's wild that we still have this knowledge here, that I can still speak to the elders, and that legacy of the region is still here, rich, that culture, you know. But yeah, they love it, man.
That's tremendous. I kind of figured it would bring the community together, so therefore the elders would be all for it. You touched on your term that you use, which kind of jumped out at me, having some cultural competency, at least for First Nations and Inuit issues, that use the term, a contraction of Eskimo. How do you respond to those that would say that is a derogatory term and should not be used?
Oh man, I mean, hey, if you think it's a derogatory term that shouldn't be used, don't use it. By all means, do not use it. If you think it's racist and it comes from a bad place, then yeah, don't use it, because that's where hate comes from. That's where anger comes from. That's where resentment and, like you said, bullying and things. There's so many words out there that are slang terms for racial people. I don't know anybody, any Inuvialuit. And that's not to say that I'm, whatever, right? I'm just trying to I'm having fun with it. I am a big fan. I was a big fan of the Edmonton Eskimos. I think it was a term of resiliency and respect that they used, that said, we're tough like Eskimos. Okay. Could they have been the Edmonton Inuit? Sure. You know what I mean? But then that would have been a whole thing. You know what I mean? That would have been, so there's somebody going to say something anywhere. Right. Am I a traditional Inuit man that goes out and hunts? I have a parka. I don't own boots, right? Like, I can't start a skidoo, but I'm definitely eat country foods. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think it's funny. There are some Inuit out there. That don't like the term Eskimo, and that's great. Okay, that's okay. You don't have to like it. Okay, you don't have to like it. But to think that you can't say this word or something, like, it's just, take the power out of it. I actually got the term eskimofo. I don't know if anybody knows this. There was Workaholics fans out there of the show that was on Comedy Central years ago, but they did a Front Yard Wrestling episode, and that's where I got it. Actually, the Blake Henderson, the actor, had a character that was very racist. It was very offensive. He was in a parka. He had a fresh salmon with him, and he called himself the Eskimofo. And he did a really bad drum dance and a sing, and he ate this fish raw, and it was pretty, like, offensive. Like, it was nothing that they were going to stand beside, right? So I actually tweeted out to Blake, and I said, hey man, I'm Inuit. I'm a pro wrestler. I'd love to use the name Eskimofo, but it's your IP. Can I use it with your permission? And he replied back. He said, yeah, send me a signed picture, dude. So there we go. But like I said, people can be offended if they want to be. People don't have to use the word Eskimo, which is why I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek using it as the Eskimo mofo. People in town. So our chief of the Inuvialuit, I was at the Northern Games. The Arctic Sports is what, like the high kicks and the muskox push, the things we've been doing for hundreds of years, right? We do it every year in the town square. It's a big event. I was there filming, and he says, we've got a celebrity here. Do we want him to do some comedy? We won't say his name here on stage for reasons, because they call me the Eskimo mofo, right? They don't put them together. So some of them do. Some of them definitely have that lens where they don't like the word Eskimo, and I respect that. I totally do. But I really don't care. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take it back. And I think the less power we can give a word like that, the better. So.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with how you present your product and yourself. So kudos to you for doing that. I know how costly a venture promoting pro wrestling is, especially in the North. But I had read in I believe it was APTN that you're looking at developing. One of the mission statements of your organization was to develop local talent. How has that worked out for you so far?
Well, I mean, I'm local. Blue is local, and Noel is local. So far now we have 3 local wrestlers that have come from the program. We've got Icicle Isaac is his name he's given himself. So he's actually 15 now, and he started last year. And we just started him off with basic chaining, rolling, show him how to run ropes. We're not suplexing him around. Nobody's giving him juice. You know what I mean? We're teaching him promos. He's learning a lot of self-confidence through it. He's a big wrestling fan, but he was a real shy kid when we first got him, but he started off by just helping us set up the tables and sitting, at the computer and pushing play on the music. And then we had him running camera, and now we're teaching him refereeing. The superintendent of the schools for the region, he's very involved with our stuff. That we have so much support. We have local referees now that are being trained. We have announcers that are going through. We're all kind of learning it as we go, right? But we're all being trained in this way where that I would love for any one of these guys to go down south, anywhere they are on vacation, and say, drop into the local show and say, hey, if you guys need a hand, we do this up north, or give an email ahead of time. Don't just show up all willy-nilly, of course, but respectfully, I think there's a lot we can offer people that we're, and by bringing people in, by learning stuff from Matt Cross, from Cheeseburger, from Mitch Clark, from wrestlers we're bringing up here from Alberta, from Marty Sugar, Todd Quality from BC. We're growing a list of people that are becoming ambassadors for the North. Like when we got Cheeseburger up here, he went home and it was crazy. Like we've got like people calling and emailing me saying, hey, what's up with your dates? Can you fit me in? But then the barrier becomes the money. So that's why we're trying to get a local buy-in, sponsors, like, local gas bar A versus the department store, and it's like Survivor Series is actually what we're trying to build next, so there's a lot of fun we can have with it, I think,
That was actually one of the questions I want to ask you. I noted that you brought up Cheeseburger and Matt Cross. What do you think their experiences were that would translate to talking to those workers down south that would, maybe want to come up and say, there's a few things that are unique still in independent wrestling, and working up there would definitely be one of them. Have you had anything translate that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, we've gotten offers now already for wrestlers. I'm not going to just start name dropping, of course, but we've got wrestlers wanting to do seminars up here. When we brought Matt Cross in, we were hoping, because it was only 3 days, like maybe 4-day trip, right, in and out. We wanted to give them the best that we could for the Arctic experience, right? You bring somebody up to the Arctic coast of Canada in the Arctic Circle, you want them to leave with something memorable. So, we got country foods together. We had a dinner that was like caribou meat. There was local fish we had there. They tried whale blubber muktuk for the first time. So after that dinner, we actually got to go out and watch the Northern Lights. So Matt's post was, my belly is full of caribou meat and I'm under the Aurora Borealis. This is amazing. And the next day we go to the Arctic coast, and for the first time in 13 years, a polar bear came into the community. So now the boys are fucking chasing polar bear. Like if they were maybe a half hour earlier, they would have seen the bear run by. So we're seeing tracks. The guys have photos of their hands in fresh polar bear track, right? And there's YouTube videos of hunters chasing the bear out of town and stuff. So they've definitely taken that on and said, hey, now like Matt Cross takes pride in wrestling all over the world. So for him, it was a no-brainer. We tried to book him for our big Yellowknife show, and he was going to come up. He was booked to wrestle Cheeseburger for the first time in their career. And it was going to be at a TAW ring. And I was so happy to do it. And then because of the show was supposed to happen next weekend. But because of the evacuations, the sponsors and things like this, we had to reschedule, understandably. And then I saw what happened was even funnier is after all that happened, like we didn't get to announce the match, right? It was internally, we were getting things booked and it was going to happen. And then another promotion down south said, for the first time ever on whatever this next, it would have been before our show too, on the 12th or something, I think it's booked, Cheeseburger versus Matt Cross for the first time ever. So we were like, well, we would have had the second match anyways.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the fans watching is asking about why Chris Benoit's son was in the thumbnail.
And that's why. Okay, so this is it. Is David and I have been friends for a couple of years now. We've known each other very well for a couple of years now. He was going to come up and he was going to be like, he was going to present the championship at our first show is what that was going to do, right? So I've got a photo. If you dig back far enough, to just a little bit farther, one of our lead sponsors is also holding the championship belt, as well as our head chef caterer, right? So there was a bunch of people who were getting to promote the title. And I was just on the way back from the second Jericho cruise. I believe it was the second Jericho cruise. I had the belt with me on the boat, and I had David there meet me in Edmonton. We went out for drinks. So I posted the photo of him with the belt to just, like say, hey, David's going to be there. And it became this whole thing about, is he training with? He's not trained. What a mark, making David Benoit his first champion. What a guy doing this. What a guy doing that. And then the thumbnail, I haven't seen that photo in fucking years, right? So then when I saw the thumbnail for this, and it's like, Des, blah, blah, blah. But then we got a picture of David, and they're like, wait, now, is that Daniel? Wait, is he going by Des now? Like, what's, and I'm like, this is all kinds of clickbaity confusion, but I love it. But no, David has never been our champion. David was going to come up, and he was going to do some ring announcing and introduce the show for us. Big friend of mine, big friend of the program and what we're doing up here. He supported us for sure. And so that was why we took the photo with him. And when we posted it, we were like, wait, I should have been in the photo with him. There was a whole bunch of like, we did this the wrong way kind of things. And definitely Instagram let us know that.
As I know, he was doing some training with some big names in the business. Has there been any thought to bringing him in addition to in those other capacities to?
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, absolutely. I mean, if he wants to wrestle, doors always open for him to come up. Even just to visit and hang out here with the fam and stuff, and just to see the region. I think, but definitely the doors always open for him to come up. And if he wants to, train with us and throw around, I mean, always, right, for sure.
Mm-hmm. That would definitely be very interesting. You have one of the things that about your company that stands out is you have and you touched on it a little bit earlier, or maybe it was when we were off air, about your social media presence and how crisp your video series is, and some of your shorter videos. How much of a focus is that for you? Because obviously it's successful because we're having this discussion now, but how much of a focus is that for you to get the word out about your company?
I mean, it's everything, right? I mean, it's honestly, I think, especially social media and getting it out there is the biggest thing for us. Like I've got, like I said, I got to meet a lot of really cool people on the Chris Jericho cruise. So I think we've gotten some really cool sort of following from that. We got some really cool eyes on it. I like to liken it as if like Wayne Gretzky going to a Pee Wee hockey game and looking at a team and saying, this is this team. I like this. Some interesting stuff here. You know what I mean? No, that never happens. That never happens. So to have eyes from Chris, to see what we're doing and to be a fan of what we got here, and just to be a friend is super cool, man. Like, and just everybody across Canada, just to say that we're in the Arctic Circle and we're the only ones above the Arctic Circle, it's a real feather in the cap to say, hey, I've wrestled all over Canada, all across Canada, coast to coast, but have you done coast to coast to coast yet, right? And there's a real opportunity. We're trying to bring up Jesse Youngblood. We're trying to bring up Sage. We're trying to, we want to bring up indigenous pro wrestlers that are doing their thing too, because it's super important for our communities to see that, So definitely something we want to do. But yeah, I think that having the attention we've gotten from social media definitely helps us in a lot of ways. But at the same time, you really want to make sure you got your best foot forward. You know what I mean? You're always putting out the best thing you can, because you realize how incredibly fickle and toxic the internet wrestling community can be, the fandom on internet. And even the one thing I like though, that I didn't realize what was happening, is another podcast called The Wrestle Special tagged us on Instagram about a month ago, and they were just like, hey, we're profiling this wrestling company that we found. Check out our episode. I was like, oh my God, I'm terrified. Like I'm terrified right now because they're going to rip us apart. Right. But it was so great because they were profiling wrestling from across the world. They wanted something Canadian that wrestled in a barn. And because our warehouse counted, I guess we got a little nod. And it was nice because they were really friendly about it. Like there's a lot going on that we could improve on. But they said, they said, these guys are just having a fun time. And that's what it is we're not out there. we're not out there in a sea of 6 other wrestling companies trying to be the best wrestling company in our territory. We are just bringing a ring, and we're watching the fans and the reactions we get from them, and just the fun that we can have in our hometown. This is there's a whole generation of kids right now, Jack, that are growing up with pro wrestling as part of their lives. Live pro wrestling, part of their lives. Fuck, we get people out that aren't even fans, but they're with their friends and they just see, what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do on a Saturday night for an hour and a half? We don't even take, indie wrestling shows can get bloated and it's 2.5 hours and holy shit, you know what I mean? We have maybe an hour and a half of matches because of our short rosters. Maybe we get 5 people. I think the most people we've had on a card was like 6. You know what I mean? So we're doing double duty almost definitely. We're opening with a tag match, a couple of singles, and a triple threat or something, or there's a gimmick match. But the fans leave happy. That's like a $20 admission, and it's like an hour or an hour and a half. And we constantly hear, this was the best $20 I've ever spent in here in the North, ever. So if the people are happy, then we're happy.
Yeah, you can't beat live pro wrestling for bang for the buck, even in this cynical 2023.
Yeah.
What did Mr. Jericho have in terms of advice for you, or did he have any words of wisdom about what you were doing generally?
I mean, I think he's just been a fan of it. He's just watched us. It was really wild to see. Like, I remember the one day I was doing a promo. We were building up for a match, Blue Wilder versus myself. And I cut a promo on Blue, and I'm a loud fat guy. I'm really animated. You know what I mean? I like to sweat, and I get out there. So I was, I cut Blue a promo, and Blue cut his response to me. And then next thing you know, I see Chris Jericho has tagged you on Instagram, and he made a video, or they said Chris Jericho sent you a video, and it's of Chris driving in his car, and he's addressing Blue, and how Blue is as boring as 10th grade algebra, and how he, the eskimofo is going to rip you apart like a polar bear all across the Northwest Territories. So maybe come at him with more energy when you're addressing the TAW locker room and my man, the eskimofo. This is stuff he doesn't have to do. You know what I mean? So I think by the time that we got, he signed another contract with AEW. I don't know what was going on because we want to bring him up, obviously. Holy smokes. If we could ever get Chris Jericho to come up, would be amazing. So the invite's there, Chris, But no, I think he's just sort of been a fan. I don't think he's ever really sort of, offered advice or given advice, or I've never really gone to him and said, hey, man, like, wrestling wise for sure. But as far as the promotion and stuff, I think he's got bigger fish to fry than, like I said, the Pee Wee hockey team in the in the Arctic here.
Well, you never know. He certainly has a background of working in remote communities, to say the least, and seems to have an appreciation for the business that's definitely in his favor. Yeah. What moving forward are your short, medium, and long-term plans for Totally Arctic Wrestling?
Short-term goals, we still have to have our first women's match. We've actually booked it for this November. So we're having our first women's match. We're having 2 very awesome wrestlers from Alberta that I won't name yet because I'll wait till it's actually booked. One thing I've learned in 4 years of promotion is until the tickets are paid for and booked and things happen, anything can happen. Card is subject to change. And yes. I'd hate to put somebody on the line. But that's our short-term goal, is have our first women's match. Medium goal, we've been using a gift so when we started, people just came forward and were like, yo, we realize that you're starting off, but we want to see you go. So we actually, one of my friends got one of those, they call them mirror championship belts, the ones you get that are like etching. They're not like acid etched, but it's just, world's greatest dad, So we got the TAW title, North of 60 championship, I wanted to call it, because it's not a world heavyweight championship. It's the North of 60 heavyweight championship. We got that belt day one. That was pretty quick, and we've had that for 3 years. A big, huge shout out to Tim Cross at Real Shoot Wrestling, in the States. He's actually big guy, awesome dude. Big friend of mine. Sorry, big guy, larger than life attitude. He came through for us. He called me up and said, "Hey, man, I want to get you guys a championship belt." And I said, "Absolutely, but I don't have money." And he said, "No, Bubba, don't worry. I got you." So our new North of 60 championship is actually in the mail, just got through customs. So that's our medium goal now, is to do our first ladder match. Nola Bear wants his championship belt back. Blue Wilder's got the belt right now. Looking like the anniversary is going to be the debut of our new championship here. So we're looking forward to doing that. And that's going to be big because it's dual plated, like etched, like brass. I can't wait. I just cannot wait. Long-term goals. Okay, well, actually, so a medium is the championship, to having the new belt, but that's almost a short-term one too. Medium would be to break into Yellowknife or Whitehorse, the two capitals of Yukon and NWT, or even Iqaluit. I'd love to go to Iqaluit, but realistically, it costs $4,000 for me to get to Iqaluit by myself. You know what I mean? So I definitely want us to wrestle and host a big event in one of the capital cities of the territories. That's our medium goal. Long term, I want us to be on Fight. I want us to be on the Fight Network. I want to have a film crew coming in, because right now, I love myself, but I could definitely use a bigger production value than we've gotten. Because right now we're using a bunch of cell phones and GoPros and whatever we can. And then I take all 4 of those footages, edit them together while I'm trying not to overexert myself, and shows out, right? So, they're all on YouTube, they're all on Instagram and stuff, all the productions we made. And we've done some cinematic matches too throughout the pandemic. So we did a scrapyard match I'm really proud of too, kind of like a short film, like a short horror film almost. So I think that's the long-term goal, would be to get us on an online distribution like that, or to even get us on TV, like APTN, Aboriginal People's Television Network here in Canada. I was on the board of directors for 6 years. I know a lot of people there. So I don't think it'd be a far cry for us to say, hey, we have a wrestling program and we could tape X number of matches. Let's get some kind of even if get one special, even if we could tape one special for TV, that'd be a lofty but reachable goal for me, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So where can the fans find you on social media, the company, and keep up with all that's happening with TAW?
Awesome. So right now we have a YouTube channel. That's where our stuff will go. YouTube is the first. That's where it all gets published. So Totally Arctic Wrestling on YouTube, Totally Arctic Wrestling on Instagram and Facebook, as well as myself. You'll find Destro, the Eskimofo, on Facebook, and Des Loreen Comedy on Facebook as well. But yeah, so Totally Arctic Wrestling, just search that wherever you go. I think totallyarctic.net is our website. We're going to have that back up again soon here. And man, yeah, so just keep an eye out for that. I think is you can see our growth from the very first video we made before we had a ring, when it was just me and Blue. The thumbnail is me and Blue. So we want to start a wrestling company. And in the beginning, it was short films. Like we had little short films, even leading up to the events. You know how like people say AEW was a t-shirt company to start off with? Well, we were just we were a short film production company to start off with. So we made episodes about these two dudes, almost like sitcom-y, that wanted to make a wrestling show. And then that evolved into us actually making a show called Saturday Night Skoden. So Saturday Night Skoden is our not weekly, but it comes out on Saturdays when we do produce them. And it's matches that we have. So we've gotten theme songs. We've got a whole thing going on there. So we're on Pro Wrestling Tees as well. If you look up Destro, the Eskimofo, there's a TAW shirt. There's a Saturday Night Skoden shirt, and my shirt is there as well.
Well, man, I want to thank you very much for your time and congratulate you on what you're doing up there. Definitely from the perspective of benefiting the community, 100%, very positive endeavor, and definitely one giant set of cojones to start a company. Wrestling is independent wrestling is a difficult proposition. Like I keep saying, even down here, up there, I got to tip the hat to you. And thank you very much for coming on the Great North Wrestling Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Jack. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. Appreciate it.
Well, fans, that's it for this edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. I want to encourage you to keep up with the happenings in TAW, as we will definitely have Des back for another interview, perhaps after some of the big developments that we're talking about. But until then, for the Canadian fans, happy Thanksgiving and see you all soon.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates.